Okay, welcome everybody. All right, so let's talk about what's going to happen. So we've got 8 weeks together. We've got up to 3 hours per session. My goal is to use all the 3 hours. There are going to be parts that are going to feel like lecture where I'm throwing information at you. Then there's going to be a lot of opportunities where you're going to be working with one another, practicing with one another. And the goal for me is by the end of these 8 weeks, you have these core skills in your bones. I have been seeing people for over 20 years now professionally. And this idea of reading people was something that was orally handed down to me about 15 plus years ago. And it was very minute and it was kind of an oral tradition. And I took that and used neurolinguistic programming and continued to model it out as I was working with individuals and even working with groups. What you're going to learn here will affect every decision that you make, from buying a new pair of tennis shoes to a dress to a car to picking a mate to picking a job. And for some of you, that's not going to feel very good to hear that. But in my experience, it's the truth. And all of us have a unique nervous system that runs like a river throughout your life, meaning it's got one direction where things flow easily. And when you go against that, it's like swimming upstream. It is challenging, it's difficult, it's debilitating, it's exhausting, and you feel like you're getting nowhere. Okay. And a lot of what brings people to coaching is they aren't getting where they want to go, they're getting stuck. Right. And those of us who know NLP know there's a lot of different reasons why people get stuck. They might have some old traumas. They might have some old imprints. They might have limiting beliefs. They probably have all of them to some degree. Okay. That's all going on in there. But when you start to think about how to work with either yourself or other people, one category of stuff to take a look at is all the stuff that gets us stuck, the limiting beliefs, the imprints, the traumas, all that kind of stuff. Then there's, okay, well, what do I need to do with the person? Like what actually needs to occur for them to get them from where they are to where they want to be? So then we kind of get an idea of like, here's what needs to happen. And here's where a lot of programs fail, because a lot of programs only address those 2 points. And so they'll do a smoking program and it's the same for everybody. They'll do a weight loss program and it's the same for everybody, or a stress program and it's the same for everybody. And what you're going to come to find out is the third pillar of that is understanding the personality of the person that you're working with. It's like literally knowing a foreign language in a foreign country. It doesn't matter how great of a communicator you are. It doesn't matter how intelligent and smart you are and how well you can solve someone's problem. If you cannot speak their language, you will not be able to communicate with them effectively. Does that make sense? Like if I go to Russia and I don't speak Russian, no matter how much knowledge I have to share with them, no matter how much information I could give them, no matter what amazing things I could do, I'm not going to get anywhere with anybody with even the most basic thing, because I simply don't speak their language. Okay. And so this is why a lot of programs that like seem really good and seem really solid in the beginning break down for people, because your personality creates predictable speed bumps, predictable roadblocks, predictable detours, and predictable like pattern loops that you'll get stuck into. And if you don't know that, you're simply unaware of it. And like you'll walk right into the lion's den again and again and again with your goals. You'll just keep doing it over and over again and go, why is it not working out? Right. Or for some of you, you might have had the experience where you get really excited about an idea and you run with it for a while and you think it's going to be great. And then all of a sudden you lose interest and you lose motivation. Now you can't get yourself to do it for whatever reason. Okay. So this is going to explain all of that. And it's going to break it down into a simple system that you can use first with yourself and then secondarily with others. And by the end of this program, you're going to be really clear on like, here are my key attractors. Here's the things that always will motivate and excite and entice me. And if I align what I'm doing with that, I'm going to be really motivated and I'm going to take action. And you will also know the key stressors. These are the things that are always going to cause stress, pressure, and anxiety in my nervous system. Okay. These are the things that are always going to cause me to make excuses, go sideways, put it off till tomorrow, lose interest, go on to some other new shiny object. And not knowing this stuff is going to be detrimental to whatever you're doing, and it will just make you kind of go crazy a little bit and wonder what the heck's wrong with you, and why can't I seem to get myself motivated, and why can't I get myself to do this? So that's going to happen. You're going to understand what that is. And so what that means is, when you are feeling stress and when you are feeling pressure, first, you're going to be able to notice it and calibrate it really, really well. Okay. Which in most programs, they don't teach us how to become aware of that. I know we talk about sensory acuity in neurolinguistic programming, but we don't tell you specifically what to focus on to notice when someone is what I call grabbed or not grabbed. And so we're going to break all that down. But there's so many patterns that when you learn these layers I'm going to teach you, you can put them together. You'll know how to work with people. So let me cover some of the things that we're going to be getting into over the next 8 modules together. Okay. In the beginning, and for those of you who have already taken NLP training, this is going to be the toughest part. I have to go over the NLP map. I need to make sure that you know it. If you work with clients, you want to be really, really good at going through the NLP map. Okay. Because it causes a belief change in the client when it's done properly. It causes a belief change that, hey, first off, I'm not responding to reality. And number 2, if I don't like the way I feel about something, I actually have some power to change it, to do things differently. So I walk people through the NLP map. I do a process called submo swap. We make sure that you understand that and you have an experience of that. That is where this program and like an NLP practitioner end in similarity. Everything else is going to be new and different material from there moving on. But I want to make sure that we all are starting with that basic foundation of the NLP map. And I don't care how many times you've been through a practitioner training, in my opinion, you cannot go over it enough. Then I'm going to show you how your personality influences that NLP map, how it influences how you create collages in your mind, how you respond to the world, all of that stuff. We're going to get into your biological drives. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the structure of ego formation. How is the ego formed? What causes it to be formed? What's driving all this kind of stuff, so that you're understanding, like, not only how you're motivated, like what's really driving you, but you'll understand that down to the very kind of core of how it all began. And all of this, why am I teaching you this? Because it gives you more power to kind of reshape your destiny moving forward and do things differently moving forward. So we're going to go over that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get very into the personal needs. And this is kind of the backbone of what we're doing. And there are 5 major personal needs. You have all 5 of them in you. So do I. Everyone we meet has all 5. But there is a dominant and a subdominant in all of us. And when you know what that number 1 and that number 2 is, you know how to work with people. You know what they care about most. You know what is driving their decisions. You know where they're going to get tripped up and where you're going to lose them. And so it gives you a key code on how to work with them. And there always could potentially be exceptions to the rule. But one of the big benefits of this program is it will economize your communication with yourself and with other people. Because when there is stress that enters the situation, you will quickly know where to go to identify what's causing it, and you'll know what to do to turn it around. So we'll practice identifying stress, and we'll practice what we call applying the antidote to doing that. Okay? So you're going to learn that. There are also, at a deeper level, what's called the personal needs stress cycles. So how does each one of these different personalities approach a new idea, right? How many of you have had the experience where something new comes along and you're really excited at first, and then down the road, you lose interest, or you become stressed, or for some reason you get stuck, or it doesn't work out, or whatever. Yeah, this will explain that in detail, and you'll go, oh, that's the pattern that I was doing. Now, One of the reasons that that's really important is there is a big difference in how you handle what's called structural change versus what's called cyclical change. Cyclical change is like the seasons, right? It's like the tide coming in and going out. If you don't know the first time you see the tide going out or coming in that it's a cycle, it could be pretty scary, right? You're like, what's happening to the world? Or imagine if the first time the sun set, you didn't know that that was a cycle. It's going to come back up tomorrow. It's going to set again tomorrow. You would think it's the apocalypse. You would absolutely freak out. So in this life, there are fundamental structural changes, like going from horses to cars, that we just don't go back on, or the advent of the computer or the telephone. And then there's cyclical changes. And so these personal needs stress cycles, they're cycles that you go through. So if you know you're in a cycle, then you know how to handle it. You know how to navigate through it. You know how to stay engaged and actually get yourself to follow through on the goal. That's why it's really important to know that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So then in module 3 or by module 3, and again, we might do these things a little bit earlier or later, depending on how much time we have, we're going to get into what's called the 4 coping stances by Virginia Satir. Now, that's the blamer, the placator, the computer, and the distractor. And then the 5th one, which is kind of what we're striving for, is what's called the leveler. And you might be thinking, okay, well, why is this important? Why are we covering this? Here's why. This layer of the coping stances is how you determine when the nervous system in front of you is open or closed. Because everything about your communication, your coaching, if you're trying to get yourself to do something, Iona or Joseph or Eva, you're trying to get a client to do something, the minute that nervous system clamps up, you must absolutely change what you're doing. You have to fundamentally change what you're doing until the nervous system opens back up. So I need to train you how to get really good at noticing when you're going into that and when the other person's going into that, and how to get them out of that so that you can kind of continue with the coaching process. Because everything you do when they're in a coping stance is in one ear, out the other. It is a total waste. I mean, I can't tell you how many stress clients I've had over the years, thousands probably, where, they went to a therapist for stress. They got this beautiful mindfulness technique that's actually really great and works wonderful when they use it. And then the only time they never use it is when they actually need it. Because by the time they become aware that they need it, they're so overwhelmed with stress and pressure, cognitively, they're not functioning. They can't think clearly. They can't reason with themselves. And all the promises they made to themselves go completely out the window. And I'm sure all of you have had this experience in your own life. Why is that? Why did you suddenly not follow through on what you said you were going to do? Why suddenly can you not use the mindfulness technique? Because you are grabbed. You are in a coping stance. You have cognitively shut down. Reason and logic don't work. It's like trying to send an email with no internet connection. Doesn't matter how great the email is. Doesn't matter what's in the message. Doesn't matter how powerful your computer is, right? If there is no internet, it ain't going anywhere. So that's why that's really, really incredibly important. The next layer that we're going to then teach you, because I want you to have all the skill sets for, like, how do we deal with this stuff? How do we get people unstuck? How do we get them out of stress and pressure? Is I'm going to teach you a pattern called the structure of upset. And this pattern was developed after I accidentally took a job working with an extremely violent population. So years ago, my first 10 years out of college, I was a mental health case manager. And so I worked with the chronically mentally ill and developmentally disabled. And most of the jobs, not to sound sexist, but most of the jobs that I had done prior to this job, it was predominantly women and a few men working there. And then one day I show up at this job and it's like all men, and they all look like ex-football players. One of the guy had tried out for the Washington Redskins. Another guy played for Syracuse as a lineman. These were big dudes. And I was kind of like, what's up with that? So anyway, they hired me. And then the first day on the job, imagine this, you walk into a job where you think you're going to be talking for a living, and they hand me a mouthpiece and tell me to get fitted for it immediately. Then they tell me to take my tie off. Don't ever wear a tie again. And I go, why? And they go, it gives them something to grab onto. And then they said, roll up your sleeves, don't wear long sleeves either. And like, as you can imagine, I was rightfully terrified in that moment. And then the guy that got hired the same day as me, 2 days later, I see him at the first staff meeting. He's got his hat pulled down low, and he had a black eye, a fat lip, and a scar across his face. And I was going, oh my Lord. And we had guys that, and this is not an exaggeration, Billy, who is German, if his pajamas were not perfectly folded on his bed by 5 p.m., he would come out and try to punch you in the face. And he was a full grown man. There was another guy, Michael, who, no joke, would get riled up for a fight by listening to Elton John's Lion King soundtrack. As crazy as that sounds. And he was like 6'3", 220 pounds, 22 years old. He was a beast. And it usually took two guys to pin him down, you know? And so I was very quickly concerned with, okay, what's the structure of anger? How do people get volatile? What's the pattern? How can we catch this earlier and get the hell out of there? Or let's, you know, save them or save ourselves or whatever. Like, what can we do to avoid this? That's where this whole pattern came from. And it turns out it's the pattern of all upset. And upset in my book, in our book for what we're doing here, is anytime you go into an emotionally altered state where you lose choice. That's it. So some people get aggressive and angry. Some people get withdrawn and quiet. Some people get apathetic. Some people get distracted. We have a million different ways of handling it. But think of a grab, okay? Because we're going to be using this term throughout the program. A grab is any time you go into any emotionally altered state where you start to lose choice. I want to be relaxed. I'm going to a party and now I feel nervous. I have lost some choice. Okay. I want to sit down and work on my book today. And now it's time to sit down and work on my book. And I want to rearrange the paper clips and clean the desk and sweep and then make some tea and then do the laundry, right? You're grabbed. You have lost choice. Anytime you're not following the plan, chances are you're grabbed and you have lost choice. And it can show up in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to teach you how that works, where all that comes from. And one of the goals of this is not to, like, you'll have better ways to handle stress and pressure. But my goal for all of you is by the end of this program, you're not having stress and pressure the way you used to. You will still have ups and downs. You're going to have good days and bad days, of course. And you are going to feel stress. Stress is never going to go away. But the frequency, which is how often you get grabbed, the duration, how long those grabs last, and the intensity of how intense they are will be permanently and dramatically reduced. Okay, I'm pretty confident that that is going to happen. And some of you who've done personal work with me know that already to be true. But that is something that you can kind of count on by doing the work I'm going to be helping you to do. Because you're just not going to be getting, the thing is that stress can show up in the body in two ways: somatically through your body. So your body starts to tighten some way and then it produces, or mentally through your mind. And I spent years and years modeling out, how does someone get stressed? How does it occur? There has to be a point at which a person passes through on the way to being anxious, but before they cross that point of no return and cognitively shut down. So I spent a lot of years trying to find what was a point that a person passes through before this happens. And again, if you're going to coach clients, you need to know this stuff, because then you will know ahead of time whether or not the advice you're giving them is going to throw them into stress or help them be successful. And if you don't know, you will just, do what feels right or do what would work for you or do what you've been told to do. And sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. And you'll scratch your head and go, what's up with that? What's going on? What am I missing here? So this will help really clean that up significantly. And then in that module, also, we're going to go over what's called the worthy versus unworthy pattern, which is a nice, beautiful, simple, contrastive difference between what happens when we're living from what we call a powerful core story versus a disempowering core story. okay, about like who we are and what's capable in the world. So we're definitely going to be paying attention to the stories, that we store in our mind, and then also the structure of those stories. All right. Then we're going to go over other key patterns. So for those of you who are familiar with the term meta programs, this in module 5 is where we'll be looking at some of those other, what we call meta programs. So meta means above and beyond. And so like one program might be, an example would be some people tend to sort by how things are the same or similar. We call it sort by similarity. And some people, when they first look at something or see something new, they sort by how things are different. And so they sort by difference. And so some people just have a tendency to do one before the other or one instead of the other. And if you know that, then it's easier to get into rapport with that person because you know kind of how they're wired. It's also makes talking to that person less annoying because then you're not wondering what's up with them. I'll give you a quick story. So an old client of mine, Bob, actually, you're going to see a picture of Bob here in a couple minutes. But Bob was, I remember he came to me one day and he goes, man, I think my wife hates me. I think Sue hates me. And I go, what do you mean? I'm like, Sue loves you. Like I've met her, And he's like, no, I'm pretty sure she hates me. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? He goes, we were going for a drive down to Monterey yesterday on the weekend. And he goes, I'm just trying to connect. I'm just trying to talk to her, And I'm like, hey, look at that car, sweetie. It looks just like your car. And she starts arguing with me. I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, her first response was, no, it doesn't, And I go, yeah, it does. It's your car's gray and that car's gray. And she goes, well, that's a metallic gray and mine's a flat gray. Right. And he goes, okay, well, the wheels look the same. And she goes, well, no, your wheels are this and this car's wheels look this way. And he was convinced by the end of that conversation that, okay, I think she hates me and she's trying to stick it to me because no matter how hard I try to connect with her, she's always throwing out a difference. And in reality, what Bob was trying to do was by pointing out how things were the same, that was his way of rubbing up against her and connecting with her and telling her like, hey, I like you, right? But because Sue was wired differently, her way of doing the exact same thing of rubbing back up against Bob and saying, yes, I feel you. And yes, I'm connecting is to point out differences. So here, both of them are trying to love one another and they're driving each other apart. And this happens all the time. So that's why it's useful to explore some of these meta programs. And I'm not going to focus on all of them during that session, but I'm going to focus on the ones that are generally, in my opinion, the most relevant in a coaching context. And they're going to come up again and again so that you stay very aware of them and then you know how to kind of navigate them. Okay. All right, cool. And then we get into how to be more manipulative and influential. And I love to throw that out there because it makes some people cringe a little bit. I am going to teach you how to be more manipulative. I am going to teach you how to get people to do things that you want them to do, even if they originally maybe didn't have the idea of doing it. Okay. But let me remind you, manipulation simply means to move with precision and skill. That's all it means. A good chiropractor is great at manipulating your back, right? A good surgeon is great at manipulating your organs so they function better. Okay. A great mechanic will manipulate your engine so that your car runs better. Okay. Manipulation is not a bad thing at all when it's used for nefarious purposes. And if I use it with someone and I think about what I want and I don't care about what they want, then yeah, oftentimes it goes awry. And this is what a lot of people kind of think of when they think of manipulation. Like I'm going to be sold a timeshare condominium that I don't really want. And then I'm going to resent, and then I'm going to feel bad about down the road. And I was manipulated into that purchase. Or some of us may feel like we've been manipulated into a relationship or into a marriage. Some of us have even been told the numerology report says we should get married next week. And then all of a sudden, like we feel this intense pressure to do that, and stuff like this. So, but here's the thing. If you really love someone or you really care about your client, the more manipulative you are, the more loving you can be. and the better care you can give your client. So that's why I'm going to teach you how to do that. And everything I teach you is going to be with this tone of do it for real, don't fake it, and be ethical with how you apply it. Okay. So one of the things we're going to teach you in that section is literally how to say no and deny a request from another person and have them feel so good about it. They thank you and want to come back for more tomorrow. And you might ask yourself, how is that possible? It's 100% possible if you realize that most of the time when people are asking for something, that's not what's most important to them. What's most important to them is what's underneath that surface level request. That surface level request is really the tip of the iceberg. How many of you, real quick, have had the experience where someone asked you for something or told you you had to do something, and like you really didn't mind what they asked for and you're happy to do it, but it felt like there was this other heavy energy around that. Like it felt like a power play or a power trip, or they were being really needy, or they were just looking for valid. Yeah, it's like there's something else here behind this, and it felt kind of icky. This is going to explain that. Okay. So there's something called deeper needs that are driving like a strong current underneath the surface level requests that people are making. And so a high level influencer taps right into those deeper needs. And that is why you can literally tell people no with the surface level requests. But because you satisfy the deeper needs so well, they feel totally satisfied and they come back for more. Also, by the way, folks, when people are trying to hurt you, I talked with a client last night and she is going through a very, very bitter divorce right now. And her ex-husband is trying to do everything he can to tear her down and destroy her and take half of her assets. And so one of the things that I know will be helpful to her is for her to get very clear on what the deep emotional agenda of her ex-husband is, and then find a way to help him feel like it's been satisfied so that he leaves her alone and goes on with his life. If someone is attacking you or coming after you, they're not going to let up until they are emotionally satisfied, more than likely. Okay. Or you just crush their spirit completely. But more than likely, when someone's got it out for you, right? We've all had these people, it's like they just keep coming back for more. And so there's a technique on how to emotionally help them feel like they've won without actually compromising anything that you value, that will help get them off your back. And so there's even a technique in there called falling on your sword that we'll be teaching you how to do, which is pretty cool. Okay. All right. So then we go on to another critically important piece, which is the art of decontamination. What is the art and science of how to receive corrective feedback and not melt down and stay resourceful? Like, let's say you're at work, Iona, and the boss is giving you some feedback about what you're doing. Like, how do you stay resourceful? How do you use that to your advantage or what have you? But how do we deal with getting tough news? How do we give tough news without having it stick to us and make us icky? And how do we recover from putting our foot in our mouth, which we all do from time to time? So that is the art of decontamination. That is another incredibly kind of important module that we're going to have you practice a lot and get really good at doing with others. And we've got several master moves to do that, because I'm a big believer, I'll tell you right now, that the messenger always gets shot. Always. The bearer of bad news always has that some ickiness that sticks to them a little bit. Think of a funeral home. Think of a funeral director. One of my clients was a funeral director, and she lived and worked in the same community that she was in. And everyone loved her. If you had asked everyone, what do you think of the funeral director? They would be like, oh, wonderful woman, super sweet, super nice, wonderful. But no one hung out with her. No one would say hi to her at the grocery store. No one went out of their way to call her up and do anything, because normally what happens is when there's a funeral, you walk into the funeral home and normally you're greeted by the funeral director and they're like, I'm so sorry for your loss. And everyone knows, she didn't kill them. She just helped them have a nice little ceremony for their burial. But person and memory, boom, right together there. And so she became this reminder of the death of their loved one. And so no one wanted to be around her. How many of you, if you worked at a company, would want to be in the cubicle next to the whistleblower and have them looking over your shoulder, even though it's just because there's this kind of negative association with it. So we're not here to judge these things. And I'm not in any way suggesting that I think these things are right or wrong. What I'm suggesting is based on my years of experience, here's what I have noticed seems to be true. And here's how to navigate through these things with yourself and with others to help people become more successful. That's what we're here to do. If you're a coach, you want to stay like Switzerland. You want to stay neutral with your client. You don't want that client to turn on you. You want to stay kind of neutral. And so you want to be challenging because they're sharing with you a lot of tough stuff. So there's a whole art and science on how to do that. And also, by the way, too, most of like the executive coaching issues that come in around relationship breakdowns. There's some part of that relationship where someone didn't take something well, or someone didn't deliver something well, or someone just absolutely, put their foot in their mouth and couldn't turn back. And then the final module, we're going to really be practicing on how to read people on site. This is one of the really cool things about this course. I don't know this of any other course that is looking at personalities or personality traits that actually teaches you how to do an assessment based on sight alone, and then you can validate it through casual conversation. So in my experience of working with high-level salespeople, I've worked with the VP of sales at Oracle, for example, in my area. The challenge with these guys is when they go out to do sales calls, I don't know that anyone has ever been able to go, hey, James, I know I'm about to sell you something. Would you fill out this 15-page quiz for me beforehand so I know how to handle you? That ain't going to happen. If Eva's guy is going to go out and sell a new contract to a homeowner, he's not going to get the homeowner to sit down and fill out a quiz first so that he can profile them or and the other thing too is that with a lot of personality profiling kind of tools, they're not user friendly. They're not what I call water cooler friendly. Like, has anyone here had Enneagram training? Anyone had any kind of Enneagram training? Okay. In my experience, most of the people that have, okay, Eva has. Eva, honestly, if you don't mind unmuting yourself.
Yeah.
And you're a Nelper, so you might be the exception to the rule. But realistically, how often are you walking around going, they're an EI 9 or whatever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Depends on their comments. I can usually detect an 8 because I'm an 8, but yeah.
Yeah, so you're good at detecting your own, but in my experience, these are things that don't get used that much because they're a little bit too cumbersome. You can't really do them on the fly, and they don't pop out. And that's what we're looking for. A simple, easy system where the minute you sit down with a client, you instantly know what to hone in on and what to focus on, and then you can quickly vet it too. You don't have to be right. With any of these reads, by the way, you don't have to be exactly right. If it's not right, you'll know very quickly and you'll be able to adjust on the way. But like the people that I coach are sales executives, real estate agents, bankers. These are all people who are never going to get access to someone's personality test ahead of time. So they need to do some sort of visual assessment, and then they can calibrate it through very casual, non-invasive conversation. So that's what we'll be doing as well. So that's kind of the main outline of what we're going to be doing. And of course, teaching you this is one thing, getting you actually doing it and proficient at it is another thing. And so that's why we're going to need lots of exercises and drills and practice along the way. So if you've got clients and you're going, why is Jim not getting the results that I want? Or why is Sally not getting the results that she wants for herself? I believe this will be that solution that you've been looking for to understand how that is. And then I also think for those of you who are more interested in personal reasons, if you think of the areas where you get stuck in, I think by the time we're done, you'll know exactly what's causing you to get stuck, and you'll know exactly what to do to get out of it. And you'll have ideas on what to do with your next goal to prevent yourself from ever getting stuck in the first place. Not that it's not going to happen. I don't want anyone to think delusionally that somehow when you master this stuff, you're never going to have a bad day. You're never going to get stuck. You're never going to, have to kind of, amp yourself up a little bit. But that is going to be a lot easier and a lot smoother than it's ever been before. And working with yourself will seem a lot less like swimming upstream and a lot more like going downstream.